Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. Okay. Glad to see you all here with us this morning. Thank you for coming. For those of you who have not met me before, I'm Dr. Mathis Kelvin. I'm Superintendent of Schools here at Oswego and just enjoying my time here in the district. This morning, I want to welcome you all to this very important conversation today that we will be having throughout today's focus group. As you all know, we have been involved in looking at efficiencies for our district. And as a part of that, we have been going through a four-part comprehensive efficiency study. And, there have been a variety of different recommendations that have been discussed and shared in public with the Board of Education. And today we are pretty much at the last portion of that study where we're looking at the possible repurposing of one of our schools, Leighton Elementary School. And there's four other recommendations that go along with that from this fourth part of the study. And today what we'd like to do is to get some community feedback from you all and really just kind of learn and hear from you as to what you think we should do as a community. Let me share that the Board of Education and myself, we've spent a lot of time looking at the study. We also wanted to make sure that we had voice in the process. So for those who may not be aware, we recently completed a pretty comprehensive survey, thought exchange, and we had over 400 folks from the community who gave us their feedback and shared with us their thoughts. And after that, we thought we still want to make sure we get some additional feedback. So again, that's why folks are here today. Let me tell you that in terms of the selection process, some folks have said, well, how did you select people? And this is, by the way, being live streamed, right, today. How did people get selected? Did you kind of pick and choose one here or there? There really wasn't a schema behind the selection process. So we had different constituencies, folks that we wanted to hear from in the community for sure, and wanted to get every group that we could, parents, staff members, teachers, support staff, empty nesters. We wanted to hear from community folks. So we had a list of folks that positions that we certainly wanted people to sign up for. But once our applications came in, it was a first come, first served, right? So once yours came in, if you met the criteria, we just selected folks, right? We didn't go down and pick and choose someone that, may be known or not known in the community. We wanted to give everyone equal footing. Does that make sense to everybody, right? Just so that we could make sure everyone had a chance to be a part of the process. So I thank you for your eagerness and for your willingness to be a part today. I appreciate you coming this morning, and we definitely want to make sure that we make good on the day today. Just a couple other things you should know. Again, this session is being live streamed, so people are watching it right now. It will also be on video on our YouTube page if you want to go back and see it after today, once we're all set. And I'm wondering, did I just hear somebody knock at the door? I think I heard someone knock at the back door there, but so this is being live streamed. There today are two folks who are going to facilitate the conversation. They have a lot of experience working with focus groups all across the state. Dr. Susan Gilmore and also Dr. Maureen Patterson, both have experience working in this entire work along with the Costello and Silke group, and so they'll be here today and they're going to facilitate the conversation, and they will share the process that is going to be taking place. Let me share that also that there is no feedback that is not welcome today. All feedback is welcome, right? We want to give everyone an opportunity to share what their thoughts are, and so don't feel in any way like anything that you have to share is not important. It is. This is a good time to share. So please, whatever your thoughts are, feel free to give that feedback to us. Also, in terms of just the logistics, if at any time you need to use the restroom, if you just go out this door here and go to the right, there are two bathrooms. There's a lady and a male bathroom very close to us, very near to us. And then the only other thing I want to share is that there's food today, right? So I don't know about you, but when I sit around my home and I want to have a good conversation, we got plenty of food, right? And that makes great for conversation. So there are muffins and there's donuts and there's coffee over there. Please, at any time, feel free to grab some. It's there for you, right? And there's water as well as coffee. And then we'll be back at lunchtime to share, bring lunch to you as well. So we think that's at least the least we could do to say thank you for your time. So with that said, again, thank you. I'm going to get out of the way. I'm going to leave and let this work happen. And thank you very much for coming this morning. We appreciate all of your time and all of your feedback in advance. So with that said, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Patterson and Dr. Gilmore. Can we give these folks a round of applause? And thank you again.
Okay, for the live stream. Okay. So I don't want to break into song, but you know what? And it was lovely that we got the applause in the beginning just in case. So one of the pieces that we want to, I'm Suzanne Gilmore. I have been the chair of the Education Administration Program at SUNY Oswego for a lot of years. Right here. And then I retired from there and I went to Lemoyne to direct their leadership program, and I chaired their education department and am now involved in the doctoral program that is there. Lots of years as a teacher and administrator in school districts, and in working with Bill Silke and that consulting group, have done a lot of studies about what do we do to maintain the quality of education we want when finances get a little tricky. And so that means many of the recommendations that you're going to be looking at today or have looked at, and that also involves looking at what do we want to do with our schools. So we have a large conversation to have today. My role and Maureen's role is not to be the answer people, but to facilitate your questions, your thoughts, and the PowerPoint that you have in front of you was done a little previous to the final edition, so we'll ask you when there's a discrepancy to please look at the one that's up on the screen. And Maureen.
Good morning. Maureen Patterson. I have been a teacher, actually started working for Oswego BOCES a million years ago, and worked at the Minetto Elementary School and Leighton Elementary School, so it's exciting. I've had interns there since, but it was exciting that this is actually the district that I was placed in all those years ago. I have been an administrator at Oswego BOCES, an administrator at Liverpool Schools. I retired from Liverpool Schools 6 years ago as the assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction and assessment, and have been at Lemoyne as the director of the education leadership programs, following Suzanne's footsteps there. I've taught at SUNY Oswego also in terms of their master's program and their ed leadership program. So I've been in education a long time, and it's nice to be able to do these facilitation groups and hear from the community, because my body of research that I've been working with is family and community input into schools. And so to me, these are the most important meetings that take place when we're looking for your feedback and we're looking for your questions, your responses, your answers also as we're moving forward. So it's good to meet all of you, and we'll have a little bit of a time during the day to have you introduce yourselves too as we go through. So let's start first with our acknowledgements, acknowledging the work of our school board and our administrative team that put all of these pieces together, as well as our superintendent. So this is not in your PowerPoint, we discovered, but so we want to review just what the agenda is for today, and we'll keep things moving. So we're going to keep coming back to that critical question. So when you read through that study, you saw that critical question again and again. It's going to come up here again and again. We're going to go over that study with the recommendations. So we remind you of what those 5 recommendations were. We put some of the study findings into that PowerPoint in front of you. It's also on that laptop. That study should be able to be clicked on and brought right up, because you'll need to refer to that this morning. And we have a couple more laptops to use at your tables too, if you need that. And then we're going to talk about the items that the board has discussed. We're going to break down the study a little bit, and then we're going to break into some small groups. And we're going to talk first about our ground rules for discussion and dialogue, because it's really important to do. So we'll get to that in a minute. We'll give you some questions to think about, and one of the things we'll do is a gallery walk. So those of you who are teachers know what a gallery walk is, where you will have written things on the poster paper, and we're going to be putting it up, and each group will walk from to view the other group's work and their questions and their responses, and so that you all know what everybody else was saying, because we won't have time in just the time that we're together to verbally say it, so we're going to put it in writing and do that. And then while you have lunch, Suzanne and I are going to analyze what you've written on all of those papers and come back and give you a brief summary of the information that came out today. And so at the end, we'll be able to revisit those recommendations that came from the initial study, make sure that we add what you have. Your school board and your superintendent are going to have that opportunity to look at all of those papers too, and all of the notes, so that they know what the community is saying and thinking. Dr. Gilmore, want to grab this part?
Your board has been very, very involved and is very eager to hear your feedback today. In the meantime, from when they received the study from Alan and from Deb Ayers, they have looked at each of the findings and the recommendations. You'll see that there were multiple findings, and then there are the 5 recommendations that we'll be addressing here today. They have also sent out and looked at the results of a district-wide study called Thought Exchange. You might be familiar with that. You might have participated. They've re-looked at the enrollment data. They've talked to real estate individuals about what are the possibilities for the Oswego community coming up. One of the things we wonder is, will Micron have an impact here if folks are moving more north versus around the Clay area, North Syracuse area? They've redone the live birth rate. One of the things you need to know about the live birth rate is those data are extrapolated, and we have a formula that we move them from year to year, but we can only get data from a year ago. So it can't be totally current because that data is not available from state ed. We looked at class size. They've looked at the bus routing, and when we talk about the recommendation in terms of the school, they've only looked at the 4 schools within the city limits. So that may be confusing for why Minetto isn't included in that piece. It's because they're looking really to keep the bus routes minimized. Also, there's a study called that every district has to participate in, the Building Conditions Survey. That gives the district information about what capital work is required, what capital work is needing to be upcoming, what's the capital work the district would like, and where does that fit in with the plan financially. And then there are all kinds of other financial implications, as you saw in the study. The board and the superintendent and the administration have been looking at those as well.
I've got this one. Okay. So moving forward, the next step is to really talk about our ground rules. Oh, thank you. You need one too, right? Thanks. So discerning first the difference between dialogue and discussion, and making sure that we're having everybody at the table speak. So as you're having some small group discussions, we're going to wander around and look and see if somebody's being quiet and say, what do you think? I want to make sure that your ideas are being put forward too. And I encourage you to do that at your own tables. At some point, you're going to be split up into different groups than who you are sitting with right now. And we've done that on purpose because we want people from different avenues to be talking to each other, people that you might not know to be speaking with each other. And part of this is that in dialogue, we are listening to each other, which is not always an easy thing to do. And I know I teach the leadership students that too, to be able to listen and pause before they ask the next question so that they can maybe absorb what is being told to them too, so that they can then have a chance to put out what they want to say. So we want to make sure that we're understanding, we're trying to find some meaning, and we're looking at some points of connection. And that's your source for that. So the ground rules, these are a few of them. We can add some more to this, but I want you to be thinking about these. So the purpose of our dialogue today is to understand and to learn from one another. We're not going to win a dialogue. We're not debating things. We're going to have some great conversations and discussions, but it is so that we are understanding exactly what you're thinking about and how you're responding to the recommendations that were coming from that study, so we can share that with the board and the superintendent. So everybody has an equal voice and they speak for themselves. You're not necessarily representing an elementary school if you're from there, or a certain neighborhood, or a certain activity that you're involved with. You're speaking for yourself. You're a community member in the Oswego City School District. We want you to be open and listen without judgment, not always an easy thing to do, because all of us are opinionated and we think we know what, we know what we want to say. We're not always open to listening to somebody else and doing it without judgment, so it's a good way for us to practice that. We need to search for assumptions that other people have, including our own assumptions. We want to look for some common ground. So you'll be writing some of these things out. We'll talk about when we get into the process, after we talk about the study, that you've got those papers, these big poster papers in front of you, and you'll be writing down some notes. We're also going to encourage you, when we're just quickly going through the study findings again, take some notes on your own. Flip over that PowerPoint and take some notes so that you can share that with the group if there are things that you really want to focus on. We want to respect the time within the time frame that we're going to allot for this. And we're going to keep dialogue and decision-making separate. No decisions are being made today. Your district is looking for your feedback. There's a parking lot in the back, that poster paper back there. There are several pages under that. Grab your marker, go back there, write something on a Post-it note, go put it up there. We want to make sure we include those. We were going to type all those things up, make sure that your superintendent and your board have access to those, and then you'll get the notes from this meeting also, so that you have the chance to see what's written on all of these papers, what the summary is when Dr. Gilmore and I are done going over that, and then we're sharing that with you, and what's on that parking lot. So if there are things we don't get to today, they'll be listed on that parking lot to be addressed. What other ground rules can you think of that we might need to keep reminding each other of? Do we cover them okay? They're the basics. We don't always remember. We know in this time in our society, we don't always remember these things, to be respectful of time and to listen and to try to understand. That's what we're here for today.
Let's start with what we know. As Dr. Patterson mentioned, that critical question is going to keep coming up and coming up. The bottom line is, you're all here because you believe in what is best for students and what is best for your own children, the children in your classroom, the children in your community, the children in your school building. So that's why we're here. We want to make sure that we continue to find ways to make the district efficient and effective. Efficient usually means looking at the finances. It also can mean looking at other processes that we use within the district. And how are we best utilizing our staff, facilities, and making decisions that we can look at over time. So not everything's going to happen tomorrow. When you're engaged in long-range planning or strategic planning, as you are, then you're looking at really a 3 to 5 years out. What do we want to be thinking about? When you're looking at those capital projects, you're going to be looking way out, and we've got some data in terms of what those finances might look like as you go down the road. We're going to be looking at the recommendations from that study, which is right in front of you. That was done with a lot of work within the district, a lot of work looking at what state ed knows about your district and what are similar districts doing around this area related to staffing and that kind of thing. We're also looking at your district data. We're hoping that when Maureen mentioned that we're really looking to have feedback rather than decisions, that feedback is based on data. We all have our feelings, but we're looking today to have that surrounded by what is the data saying that your district should consider in terms of moving forward. We're also going to ask you, as she mentioned, to take notes for later group. We're also looking that you keep in mind these kinds of questions as you're thinking about that data. Oswego's got a lot of history. All districts have history. So what's the history that you're aware of and you've been involved in around these kinds of issues? Bringing that history forward, but again, keeping that in terms of providing information and not a judgment about whether or not those were the right decisions, the wrong decisions, inappropriate decisions, et cetera. What facts do we know? And that's the data that you've got in your packet. What words, phrases, or pieces of data stand out for you? If I asked you to look at that data and circle, what are the couple of things that really stand out for you, that really make a difference in your thinking about where the district should be heading? What would those pieces be? Also looking at what are the deliverables? We can have this wonderful pie-in-the-sky idea about what we'd like if money were not an issue, but we know that the finances are an integral part of this. So what's feasible? And then again, looking long-term a little, what's feasible in the now? What's feasible next year? What's feasible in 5 years? When we're looking at that long-term piece, we need to think of some of those other variables, such as real estate, such as state ed. Right now, we've got money from COVID. What's going to happen when that money is no longer there? What's going to happen when we think about new building in the district and what revenue that might generate?
So this is the question we want you to keep in mind throughout. I would actually take one of those Post-it notes that's on your table and post it right onto that page so you can go back to that. So as you look at the data, so as you talk in your small groups, you keep coming back to say, wait a minute, what was that critical question again? What are they looking at? What was the study looking at? What did the district ask the study to look at? So it is about, I'm going to read it out loud to us. So how can the district maintain and enhance the educational opportunities for Oswego students while continuing to ensure efficient and effective utilization of staff and facilities, as well as fiscal responsibility for the district's taxpayers? I will tell you that I know when I teach, when I was a principal, when I was an assistant superintendent, I always said students first. That's right in that second line. It is always about students first, and I know that's why you're here, because you're the community members, and that's who you're thinking about right now. The other pieces are the foundation upon which this district is built, with the staff and the facilities and the finances, but it's always about the kids and what you need to do here. So one of our gentlemen today was talking about a poverty initiative that you have going in this district that is absolutely huge, that I know that the city of Syracuse also has going. And so those are the pieces that we look at, because we have to look at our students that are living within our community and being part of the educational opportunities here. So this is a question we're going to keep coming back to.
I'd now like to invite you to turn to this page in your packet for these recommendations. And if you just take a minute and read over these, just to refresh what we're really going to be thinking about today. Do we have a page?
Suzanne, I don't think they put it in there.
Okay.
They didn't include it, sorry. It's on that study, they didn't include it when we sent the PowerPoint.
Okay. Then you have it. We're sorry. That's why we mean please look at the one that's on your laptop on your table. But I'll go through these then all together. Is it in the back? Okay, great. Thank you. So if you would, just take a minute and refresh your thinking. This would be a great time to put down any notes next to any of these recommendations, your initial thoughts about these. We're going to be asking you in your small groups to look at all 5 of these recommendations.
So we'll give you a few minutes to do that. At your table, take some notes on those 2 pages yourself, so that you have some things that you want to perhaps ask or react to. We'll start to wrap up your thinking, give you about 30 more seconds, because you'll be coming back to these and responding to each one of the recommendations separately.
Just quickly, for individuals who may be watching and may not have this in front of them, we're looking at updating the enrollment projections. We're looking at considering a change in the elementary school configuration. We're looking at having a facilities planning committee so we can really deal with what are those issues in the broader sense within the community. We're also looking at engaging the community and its architect in planning and discussion of facility needs and options for the entire district, and then considering the potential capital project work related to, and they'll be in your packet, existing debt and what priorities the district has and how much debt they're interested in incurring to make those projects happen.
So as you wrap up your note-taking for the moment, we just want to make sure that you're aware of the fact you are in this group, because you've got laptops in front of you that you were able to bring right up the front page of the Oswego website, and you can see that the study is on there, the FAQ is on there, and the fact that there were a couple different letters that went out to the community engaging all of you, asking you to be part of this, and I'm sure that there will be follow-up information that goes out to the community too. So just reminding you that the district is trying its very best to engage the community in this developing process. Ready to jump into the data, Dr. Gilmore?
I think we can. What I mentioned again was that the live birth rate is a little tag behind, but you'll see in this slide, and then what impact does that have in terms of enrollment at the different building levels. So you're looking at a decline in enrollment and birth rates within the school district, which obviously impacts classes and class size and school buildings. Again, hopefully this one is in your packet. They've fluctuated, but they're generally declining, which would affect then the entire Oswego program.
And districts typically engage a company to do this every few years, so that that's how they get that updated information, and then it's also provided to state ed.
Good morning. I'm just curious, is this just from Oswego Hospital birth rates, or is it other hospitals?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Because, for example, I have 3 children in the district, but I delivered them in Syracuse. Okay.
No, they should be counted. They should be counted for. Let me go back to, I remember when I was in Liverpool schools, it would not just be people who delivered at the hospitals in Syracuse. It would be the children that, may have been born even up here in Oswego County. Families moved down there, now they're in Liverpool schools.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. The next is the enrollment history and projections. Again, you're able to see here that they've taken it out to 2019. What happens with this? If you start, let's look at 22, 23. Now draw a diagonal all the way down. What we look at when we do that is kindergartners will be first graders next year, second graders, third graders, and so it moves down the grade configuration based on each year. So what would happen is, as Maureen mentioned, we would be replacing, well, this one goes out to 22, 23. When we do these tables and we have this formula to do these, it's our best guess because your population could really change. So it's pretty accurate out through the next couple of years unless there's some major change within the district. So this is what the data is that the study and your school board and administration have taken a look at. Bottom line is you're noticing from the K-12 total in 16-17 over here to the very end, we are certainly declining in enrollment. Whether that's exactly the number, that we can't tell unless it happens on an annual basis and they get better data.
And that incorporates those live births. It also begins to look at, the things that you can't project or expect at all, whether or not companies are coming in or companies are closing, in some of the other employers in the area. That would be the typical reason why families would be moving from this area. Give her the mic.
Hi, on the bottom of this page, it just says ungraded special needs students are not included in these totals. Can you just explain that a little bit, what that means?
If you had some students that were between grades, or if you had a school that was clustered, it might be more of a K2 classrooms or 3-4 classrooms, if you had that kind of thing, then those students are not disaggregated for a specific grade level.
It's also the students with disabilities who are in the 1214 or the 1213 classes who are not necessarily graded by grades 9, 10, 11, 12 because they can go to school until they're 21 at this point. So that's part of that. So even though some of those students may go to Oswego BOCES or to another site for school, that's part of what ungraded is also.
What you're saying is they're
No,
not counted?
it says they're not included in there. When they did the initial study, they didn't include those
I mean,
students.
do they know how significant the number is?
They'll have a number in terms of your overall enrollment, but not by grade level.
I would put that on a parking lot question for sure, because they absolutely know who the students are in the 1214 classes, in the 1213, so that in 611 classes, I mean, there's a whole variety of special education classes. They would know who those students are and exactly what the numbers are. It's a rejection of those students through that gets a little skewed, whether or not in a 4-year, they're in a 7-year time frame. But please put that down in the parking lot. We want to make sure to include that one.
Right. And they're included in the total number. It's just hard to disaggregate by grade level because, as Maureen mentioned, they could be across several grade levels depending on their needs.
Yep. It affects graduation rates too. That's how
Yes,
we
it
look
does.
at it.
Enrollment history. This is just a shorter version of what you've just seen, just to kind of give you a sense of the difference.
So it shows you about 1,000 students in the last 20 years have gone down, and we know that that's a history of New York State, the history of Central New York, Northern New York, too. So we don't know if factors will change with new employers coming in that will change that enrollment history. There will be more families perhaps moving into this community. That is not something that we know or can project, but they can tell you what the enrollment history actually is and that it has slowly decreased everywhere.
Since one of the recommendations regarding elementary schools is included as one of the 5 that you'll be looking at today, we've included a few of the slides from the actual study here to just highlight what's this looked like for a 5-year history in enrollments and what's that 5-year change you can see on the very right-hand column.
And when school districts look at the buildings, they typically look at building size and they look at the number of students. So you can see when you're looking at 21, 22 school years that Leighton has the smallest, which is typically one of the reasons that school districts, having gone through this in other school districts myself, that we typically look at one of those buildings first, that is the smallest population of students in them. Then they broke it down by the class size in each one of those buildings, and Oswego has some terrific class sizes compared to many school districts in this area,
Yes, you do.
which is wonderful. But it lets you know, and again, this would not have, I'm going to go back to your question about the special ed classes, they're not included in here in the same way. We have the integrated co-taught classes and other kinds of classes, particularly at Minetto, that's an inclusion school, but all the schools have that. So, but these are class sizes based on the students enrolled in each one of the grades and assigned to each one of those classrooms at K 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And as Maureen has mentioned, when you look at the average class size, when you look at Leighton and you look at the other buildings, you see that difference.
So elementary sections of study broke it down by not including Leighton because they were only looking at schools within the Oswego city limits. Question, let me get you the mic.
Okay, so in no way, shape, or form am I doubting any of this. But with any data, you got to look at what has happened. So in Leighton School, a section was cut from each grade level. So therefore, wouldn't the enrollment go down?
No, not necessarily. They probably cut it because the enrollment had gone down already. So, okay, hold on. All right, help me. Tell me what decision was made.
It was cut so that the education center could be closed, and the education center moved into a wing of Leighton.
So when they moved the DO over to the education center, you're saying that's when they cut it. It appears that the class sizes didn't change dramatically because they already had a lower enrollment in the school. Right, from every grade level. But it looks like when we look at the size of the classes, if you would continued and say kept 3 for each one of those, you would have had 44 kids divided by 3. You would have had much lower class sizes, like 15 in each. So that's right. Right. Already moved? Okay,
If you know town of Oswego was Leighton catchment, that's not.
okay, okay. So redistricting has already affected that.
It was, that redistricting was done so that
Got it. I've been involved in those things. I got it. Okay,
And when
thank you.
you're
Thank you for your
involved in
question.
that second recommendation, that's a point that your team or any other team
Mm-hmm.
will want to make sure you put on the sheets. Because that is the history perfect, that's the history we're talking about.
Because when you mentioned redistricting, then you know that once a school is closed, if that ends up to be the decision, then they have to redistrict. And we redistrict house by house, kid by kid, and go right through. So you want to say, let's revisit what happened before, because one of those statements is we don't want the same kids to continually be moved to a different place. And that happens. So I'm going to ask you to put that on a Post-it note and put that up in the parking lot or on one of those sheets, okay? So that you don't lose touch of that statement.
This is the projection for before and after there would be a school closing. So you're seeing that to accommodate the number of students that would be shifted to and among the 4 schools, that would be a difference in the number of sections. Remembering at the same time that enrollment's going down. So it's sections, but it's also related to, okay.
My question is, why are we using the numbers from last year and not our current enrollment? Your data states that it's 2021-22. We're talking about last school year. These numbers that you are presenting to us currently are not accurate. This is not what we have currently in our school.
Right, these are the numbers that came from that study that was done by the other 2 consultants within the Casalo-Silke Consulting Group. That's the reason why, those numbers. So I'm going to ask you then to say that you want this updated to 22, 23. Yes. Yep. Yep. Please write that, turn around and put that right on that parking lot, because I think that is absolutely something that has to be considered, that you want the 22, 23 data. There, particularly when you're looking at class sizes and you're looking at section numbers.
Part of what happens with this too is that you put in beds, forms, and numbers at a certain point in the state, for the state, and having those data available because they're trying to use a consistent source for that. So at this point, your current data would be available, so that piece updated would make sense.
And those of you who work in the districts know that the beds numbers don't go in until October.
Right.
So they actually don't finalize until mid-October of every year. If you're a teacher in the district, you know that that's how we do that. We look at how many teachers, how many sections, how many kids. It goes in the middle of October. So this data is probably 2 weeks old. So that's something that just needs to be pulled. I saw a hand, though.
Good morning. So I just have a question in looking at that Minetto's off the table for sending kids. I think going back to what these folks over here said, the closures and redistricting that happened in Leighton has happened in Leighton for many years, has really kind of set the ball in motion for this to happen, what we're talking about right now. What I don't think is fair is that it is just, seems to be Leighton on the chopping block. We're talking about not moving kids to Minetto because of the busing route. However, back in 2011, and I'm sure there's other years when we redistricted, we bused kids from way out in Scriba to Minetto. So if that was okay then, I guess that my point is that I don't think this should be a Leighton thing. I think this should be an entire district thing. And I think if we're talking long-term and long-range and sustainability and fiscal responsibility, we should be looking at how are we going to make this a long-term change that makes the most sense, which means everybody is going to be talked about. All the bus routes are going to be looked at. Because if we can't move kids to Minetto today, it doesn't make sense that we are busing kids from Scriba to Minetto from decisions years ago.
And
So-
as a result of this study, when a few slides ago, the board has been looking, and the district and transportation have been looking at your entire bus routes. So that's something that gets updated every year, and that'll be a good point for you to put on or to put up on the parking lot. The key that we're looking at today is if there's any question about the data, that we would like you to mark down here or mark down on the parking lot. We only have access to the data that you do. So if there's something missing or you have some other history, then please make sure you include that.
That will go on that poster paper for recommendation number 2.
Right.
Okay, so that when we get to that, and we break into the small groups, and I saw lots of heads nodding, so that's where you want to begin to write down, why haven't you considered other, other schools within our district? What else are we looking at? Here is, add in something like the history, because that was one of the questions that we said, what's the history here? You know the history better as community members. So absolutely, that's the place to put it, okay?
So just going off of what she just said, I think all of us in this room want this process to be equitable. And in the past, maybe some of us feel like it hasn't. So I think our goal for this whole thing would to be make sure that it's equitable, which goes back to our original question that we need to stick to. Because my concern is this is not going to be equitable. And I think we've seen that in the past.
Put that right into the recommendations, so that when you write that up and we give that information back to the superintendent and the board, we want them to hear that word. And I love that you put it back to the question, because it helps when you're saying, this is the question you asked us to study. Here's why we want to look at that.
Yeah, looking at the data here, I've noticed that you have the results of closing Leighton in terms of the number of sections per school. What's the class size, the average class size for those sections? Not currently, after we would have closed. What would be that? Okay, because that would be a concern of mine, since that in your previous data that you've published, you indicated that that was a community concern, is the size of the classes. So it's one thing to talk about sections. How big are these sections?
And please.
That's the updated
Right.
information you want.
Right.
Absolutely. So that goes back to speak to 22, 23, and whatever other year. So you want updated information on this year's sections and class sizes, and you want updated information moving forward. If you make a proposal, if it's Leighton or if it is another school, what would that look like? So it has to really be mapped out across the board. Absolutely. Suzanne, were you saying something?
No, I was just going to point to, when we look at these sections. Pardon me?
Which one do you want me to look at?
Keep going.
Sections that way or that way?
One more. And one more. And one more.
All right. I'm going backwards. Do you want me backward?
Pardon me?
You want sections or
I'm
enrollment?
going to move forward.
Okay.
Because I want to talk about the staffing for these sections. Okay. We have a history of the district in terms of staffing, because a question that has come up typically is, okay, what happens to the staff who's in that school? And some, obviously, when we've increased some sections in different buildings, and we'll get that information about what that means in class size, our sense is that given that the class sizes have been actually pretty nice here, that would have been a major concern of the board when they also began to address this data, but we'll make sure you have that checked out. This is the, when we now look at, okay, so why are we doing this? If the numbers aren't that compelling, what are the finances around making sure that we have one less school building for elementary students? This is a history of what you've had, and again, it can only go back to last year. This is the number of retirements and/or resignations. That's where the district then regains some financial benefit, because if I lose a teacher through attrition, then I may not need to replace that teacher. We're not talking today, because it's not one of the recommendations, but you also have it in the study. When you look at the number of sections at the middle school and high school, that also is a factor in who are the staff that you're needing to hire, what sections do you need to be covered for K-12. So you may want to take a peek at that, because this is districts, you've got some high school teachers who are retiring, middle school, and then the key point for today is really those elementary teachers.
I'll go back a couple.
Yep. When we look at savings again, in the studies that Maureen and I have both been very involved in, we've looked at utility costs. What does it mean when we have one less school building to heat, et cetera? I'm going to ask folks to use the microphone only because this is being live streamed.
Just going back to that last retirement slide really quickly, could you click back to it? I was just curious how many of the elementary level, for example, educators are currently eligible for retirement at the end of the 2022 or potentially 2023 school year? Because these numbers are a few years old, and some years we've had big hiring booms, and some years we haven't had to have big hiring booms because, teachers were in, we hired a bunch for a while, and we didn't need to hire anybody new for a long time. So I was just curious about the current, eligible teachers for retirement, because we may not lose people to attrition.
I think there's a slide, we don't have that on this for today, but I think there is a slide already about that, but that's another piece to put up. Thank you.
Right, and I jotted it down on our list too, so that we have that. The teacher shortage is another one. I would be curious about what was the actual teacher shortage this year in spite of having retirements and people that move, because people do move and transfer. So what were the implications this year? How many did they have to hire?
In this data, the year 2020 and 2021 pandemic should also be considered, because that had an effect, because that made some people take decisions that they were not thinking of. So that's why those 2 years should be the context should be made clear there. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So be sure to jot that down under those recommendations that talk about the studies. You might want more information going back a little further than 2019 to see if that's an actual pattern that makes sense. The interesting thing is that 2021 was a lot lower than it was in the 2 previous years, and you wonder how that ebbs and flows in terms of retirements at the elementary level.
And again, I think a really key piece that Maureen mentioned is right now the teacher shortage. So you have some real quality teachers and staff in the district. How would this change enable you to keep some of the teachers that you do have and then provide them, they would then be able to provide be mentors for new faculty that you do hire. And that mentoring program is essential.
Right.
So,
And required by the
Right.
state.
yes.
So let's see. So we've got the general fund balance sheet. So just, I know it's tiny, tiny font. You've also got it in your documents and on the slideshow. So just so you can see that your district has set up a lot of fund balances where they annually set aside money that pays for certain things. There are many districts that don't do that have not had the wherewithal to do that. And you actually are set up with those fund balances in place. Oop, want me to go back?
Okay, no, go ahead.
Okay. So that gives you a little bit more detail on the history of the fund balance. And knowing that, this is the important part, particularly when it comes to election time, in the springtime, the board, voting for the board and voting for the budget, that monies that are put into each one of these fund balances can only be spent on those, because people are always saying, oh, but put it into the teachers, which was where we know we want our funds to be put. The money that's set aside in specific fund balances can only be spent in those areas, as we know also about the capital money, so that we know when we have capital improvement money, meaning money to build and use architects and whatever, that money can't be put into our educational system for our staff. So those are always some of the key things, the message that we always have to learn to be able to share with our community too. So you can see the amounts of money that are actually set aside to pay some of those bills that come forward.
And even within the regular budget, I remember as a principal, I'd have teachers come and say to me, can I swap my technology or textbook money for an aid? And so we'd go through the budget to show that those are discrete categories, and you cannot do that kind of thing.
So the capital debt that you have, capital debt meaning to fund those capital projects, the building projects that you have, and all of those funds, it's the application that is made to the state and approved, and the process that you go through. That money is entirely separate than the money that is spent on teachers and staff.
And for that recommendation, these are some of the numbers that you'll want to consider when you're thinking about, and what's some of the other capital work you'd like done in the district, and you won't be able to project a cost, but that would be one of the factors that you'd want the administration and board to consider.
And then the property tax factors that are up there that speak to you about the full property value, the tax levy.
And none of us like to pay more taxes, but what's happened is you've gotten property tax level has been reduced in the past 5 years. Then you add the tax rates given that levy, and the property value increasing at a greater rate than the district tax levy. So you all may want to sell to Micron and, make $1 million or whatever.
Hi, I guess I want to go back a little bit, and I apologize that I didn't ask this earlier, but I'm curious to know why and by who was this whole study initiated by? Just some of the finding points were that, like, there's consistency shown, like when we're talking about tax, that we've been supportive in the community of, passing school budgets. As a parent, as an educator myself, understanding how effective lower class sizes can be. If we're at, I could see if we're at 10, 12 students a classroom, there being a bigger concern. But looking at even last year's data about class sizes, I'm just curious why was this prompted? Why are we this far? And I know historically it's always been something that's talked about, but I think the feeling is we're moving a little bit further in this process than people are comfortable with. So who prompted this study and all of this? Why, if class sizes are reasonable, if community members are passing the budgets and accepting that, why the push, why the recommendation for, why some of these recommendations? I'm not saying I'm questioning all of them, but a school closure is pretty significant, and I'm just not sure. After doing some research myself, I do find it a little interesting that that our superintendent was also involved in this situation in Wayne Central School District in 2016, where community members were very concerned about a school closure too. So I'm just wondering, is this our superintendent pushing this study to be moved forward? Is this a community thing that I'm unaware of as a taxpayer? I don't know. I guess I'd like some guidance and information on that. Like, where did this all start?
What happens is school districts are engaged in strategic planning, and your district really did go out ahead and looked at what will this mean. Your board has to approve and authorize the study, and it really is, when we looked at that first critical question, how do we make it efficient and effective? So this really is a long-term look. If they wanted to look at tomorrow, then closing may not be an option. Some of these other fiscal pieces might not be as relevant, but they are taking a look at, we want to sustain and maintain what we have for our students here in Oswego. What will that take? Right now, when you look at, well, we've got the short-term kind of look in terms of those enrollments and the finances and whatever, but you're looking at a long-term piece for keeping the district viable. So the study began with the Board of Education saying, we want more information. We want data so that we can make an informed decision about what should happen. This is the Leighton, as I'm sure we knew ahead of time, that would certainly be the largest thinking of the group. It has been when Maureen and I have had to close elementary schools. And so what are those considerations that you want to make sure the board is thinking about? When we think about a closure in another region, one of the priorities for the superintendent was he really wanted to have your input. When voices aren't listened to, then it gets tricky, and it gets tricky typically for an individual who's been known to make that decision. So before any decision is made, he wants everybody taking a look at the data, and what's the data mean to everyone? We're looking at the data piece, and then again, as we know very well, we're also looking at the emotional parent educator piece. So those are two sets of data. It's a little tough to qualify and quantify emotion and feeling, but those are the pieces that we want to have come out here today.
So did the board prompt this then?
Yes.
The board members asked for this study decision, or did the board come up with that independently? That's a great question to ask. Okay. No, you're fine. My question is, so obviously we're seeing a decline in enrollment before COVID, but with last year being the first year that we had students back in school, is this really the time to be considering class sizes and whatnot? Because we probably still have some families, some parents that we have the increase in homeschooling, but for how long? I have a kindergartner this year, and I considered keeping her back because I have a 2-week-old baby at home as well, and doing homeschooling as long as you can until you want them back in school. So how do we know that these enrollments are 2 years after COVID hits are actually accurate?
Yes, please put that question down. Because you're right, across the state, homeschooling has increased, so you want to know what the actual numbers are here, and if families in this district actually participated in that. To go to the first young lady's question, what I wrote down was the why. You want to know the why. Why was this initiated? So that's another question that we want to make sure that you have, so you know exactly to track back where it began.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because before coming to this meeting, I had all those questions. But sitting here, I wasn't sure when to ask that, because in early September, when that email was sent by the superintendent, I downloaded the report, and then I looked at the recommendations. There were some specifics, like focused on Frederick Leighton. Right. And that's why when people responded, in that there were questions being asked, why Frederick Leighton? So basically what she said is, what is the context? To me, as a parent, because it's easy to get emotional. No. Let's get driven by facts. And the biggest challenge with data is, what do you want to see us? When we talk about data, nowadays we live in a society, we say data-driven. But how was that data collected? Who prompted that data collection? How was it funded? And the context is not clear. You know, when I'm reading the recommendations, to me the context is not clear. And I was talking to another parent whose son went to Frederick Leighton 10 years ago, and they said, no, similar discussions happened earlier also. So I'm scratching my head like, oh, okay, so this has some history. And I have no context of that history. And I do understand those who are at the helm of affairs, they have to take tough decisions sometimes. But my concern is, in a democratic setup, those who are trying to make decisions, what kind of efforts are they making to see what's happening at the grassroots? Because at this table, they made some good questions because they had context of the past. We don't. So when you come to make a decision, you know, there's a cliche, measure twice, cut once. So what's our approach?
I appreciate
And
that.
the data that we get from you today will be very helpful in that process. Thank you.
So the key words that just came out of all of your questions are really, what's the why? Where did this come from? Why was it started? What's the context? I think that's really important. And what's the most updated information to even today? Because that's what you want to do. And then why was one building singled out? And that goes back a little bit to your context. I'm going to write those things down, but please do the same thing.
So in addition to that, I went to Frederick Leighton, but when we moved here 35 years ago, this was an issue. They were talking about closing Frederick Leighton. So why has it been them this whole time? Why Frederick Leighton when they have the least amount of work to do, when it's the best maintained school? Why are we not thinking about another school that may need more work that we could refit for some district offices? And why do they all have to be in one school? Why can't they be spread out and utilize other classrooms? We're in an age where we need somebody that's going to be there for a command center person that's going to be in charge if an incident happens. Why is Frederick Leighton the only place where that can happen? That's ridiculous.
And that's a great point to put down. Okay, why are not other schools considered? Was there another hand here?
So I'm going back to the facts like he just did. And I'm a teacher, so I'm kind of data-driven. But what I'm hearing, I think, from our community is we're not trusting this because of the history. And like, I went over everything, like, the math is not like working out for me either. So that's why I'm feeling this bit of distrust. So I'll give you an example. They say in third grade, the average class size is 14. I have 18 currently. So if you add 14 to my class, I'm up to 32 kids. So if we're trying to keep under the 25, right there, we've already gone above. Then the issue of when they move to the next grade level. So if we do all that adjustment and we say, okay, our numbers are good, well, what happens if you take a section away from 5th grade and now 4th grade moves up and needs that section? Now we got to redistrict. Like, what happens then? Are we going to redistrict all these kids and then you have certain kids constantly being moved that are already in trauma environments that should not be moved?
Long-term plan is what you're looking for.
You know, our schools are very different, and I don't know if everybody realizes that, but Fitzhugh Park School is much different than Kingsford Park School. And we're basing data saying that these students are the same. They're not. They're not, and those are facts. Go look at your free and reduced lunches.
Right.
You know, we also, there's some things like that are swept under the rug. Like, we know families don't go to the districts they're supposed to. They have a babysitter and now they can go to the district they want. Look at the increase at Kingsford.
You mean the school they want,
Right.
within the district? Okay, thank you.
Maybe if we want it equitable, those kinds of things shouldn't happen either.
Right.
That we're not even looking at, because, so that's what I'm talking about with the data being skewed.
Right.
Like, there's lots of things underneath that aren't being said, which frankly, some things, I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want to get fired from my job. But I've lived here all my life. I know there's kids that go to other schools and their whole families have, because they have childcare somewhere else.
Then these are the kinds of things, again, to please, I'm just going to keep us moving. Please put those down. Your sheets have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to be asking you to look at those recommendations and jot these down, even though we're catching some of them and we've got the parking lot. But these are the issues that you want your answers for.
So part of what you were talking about was the redistricting process, and you're very right. So I was trying to write down all the enrollment pieces, having been through redistricting and done that myself, and having closed 2 schools in Liverpool with the low numbers, having to look at things like the babysitting. What is the policy and what are the numbers? What is the homeschooling? What are those class sizes? What do you gain? What is a long-term plan for that? So those are all the pieces that you know you want to have the data for and that you want in place before decisions are made. So I hear you.
Going back to enrollment, we know that homeschool enrollment is going up. Which is great because there are lots of great programs out there for these kids, and it's different, it's not traditional. But correct me if I'm wrong, for each student that we lose funding, correct? For each student that is enrolled in a homeschool program, we don't get the funding for that
Right, you wouldn't get the state aid on it. They have to file a plan. The family has to file a plan.
Right, so if the number, if our district enrollment is decreasing and homeschool enrollment is increasing, has there been any inquiries as to why? Because just as, you know, coming from a business perspective, that's just a good business model. You want to see why you want those kids back in your schools because you need that funding. So, I mean, I looked at, I believe the most recent data I pulled, there were actually more homeschool enrollments for the last year than there were public school. So has there been anything done to investigate why those numbers are going up and what we can do maybe to get these kids back in our schools? Because, you know, maybe it's not, maybe it's the parents' choice to homeschool because, you know, they have the opportunity to do so, but maybe are the parents pulling out for other reasons, you know, or their needs not being met?
Thank you. Another important point.
I would also
Lauren's got
consider
it.
the parochial schools in there besides the homeschooling. How many students are going to parochial schools or charter schools? Yeah, yeah, even though it's more of a distance to get them to charter from here. Right, right. Mm-hmm. Right. So I wrote that down on the things that you want updated. So those are all the elements that are part of redistricting, closing the school, or maintaining the configuration you have. You want the most updated information on all of that.
Why are families willing to spend money on an education that should be provided at the same quality?
Right, okay, so we'll look at not
yeah.
only just the numbers, but is there a rationale, is there some data we can get about the purpose and why they're doing that? Thank you.
So there is a lot of the repeated word that we use is data, right? We keep saying this is the data, this is data. So as some of us have insisted, hey, we need like the most current data,
Right.
and then also make sure this data. So as we are skimming through data, right, if there is some discrepancy, right, because it is quantitative, 2 + 2, 5, oh no, let's correct it, 2 + 2, 4, right? But the biggest challenge with data is data interpretation. How is this data being interpreted? And then what we don't see, or that is not spoken much, is when you interpret data, no one is questioning much. Is there a chance of misinterpretation of data? There lies the crux of it. How is this data being interpreted? And then are there any errors in that interpretation?
Right. And that's what we'll have you
Thank
do
you.
in small groups, is you'll be taking a look at that data, jotting down, repeat these questions if you need to in your small groups, and you're writing them down by recommendation, because you're right, every table will have a different perception of data because you look at it from your employment status, if you're a teacher or you're a business person or whatever you are, and you're going to look at it from that, and whether or not you have a child in school or not, whether or not you work in the schools or not. So that's part of what we'll do in small group.
Hi, I have the microphone. Oh, I'm over here. One of the things that I'm not seeing or hearing discussed is the impact in our classrooms due to the pandemic and the schools being shut down. And honestly, our district's plan during the original shutdown being very poor. And then the impact of virtual learning on especially our elementary students. So the concern that I have as a Kingsford parent is we already have the largest school. And what I want to know is how are we going to keep the AIS services that we need for our kids that need academic interventions, which are more now than before the pandemic. And we're talking about putting them in smaller rooms. We need more of those rooms. We need full-size rooms for those AIS services, not less of them and smaller rooms. So I'm not seeing anywhere in here the plan to address that impact, which is going to be felt for many, many years. And to me, it's irresponsible to be making this decision without considering those factors.
Perfect. I
And
wrote
what
that
happens,
down.
and what happens in a district is they do a space utilization study. So what classrooms are being used when, because oftentimes we have classrooms that are vacant for perhaps some of the AIS services or that kind of thing. So prior to any decisions being made, that building and space utilization would occur.
I'm concerned about the special needs students also. They're split up into small groups in the different school buildings, and they're not getting the education that they need, the attention or, my thought was turn Leighton into a special education building right next to the high school. You can have high school students take classes and learn how to help these kids and maybe put them in careers of teaching. I'm concerned that the special education children, the number is increasing. I'm sure everybody's noticed that. And they're getting left behind. When we were in school, they were saying no child left behind because they didn't like flunking kids. But then those kids just didn't learn. They just kept putting them up. My next door neighbor has a senior in high school. She's reading on a 3rd grade level. I'm new to this area. I just purchased my home last year. I had a special needs grandchild. And every year I had to fight and fight and fight to get him placed in an appropriate classroom and have him be taught. I homeschooled him because he wasn't being taught in the school. how many of these homeschool kids are special needs that need special attention? Not a daycare, although we appreciate the time because they're a handful, but they need to be taught. I had my grandson home for a summer and I taught him how to read the Dick and Jane book. He was 12 years old.
It's the instruction.
And if it was all in one building, you could have all the teachers that are split up around there more in one space where they could feed off of each other and get the kids into different classrooms that they would be taught at their level, not at their grade, but their reading level, their math level.
Here's the challenge with that. So just, I probably have to stop you at least putting all special ed kids in one building. By the state, that is not allowed at all. We've come a very long way from doing something like that. What I hear you saying, though, is that all children need to be receiving the right instruction and having the right amount of teachers and the right amount of support for them. As a special ed teacher, that was my first career. You know, having moved through that, we're not allowed by state at all, and honestly, for all the right reasons, to put all the children in one building, because then they don't bump up against any of the other learners in our community or in our society. But I'm hearing you say they need the right instruction, but they need the right teachers, and they need the right support, and they need to have everybody held accountable for teaching everybody, including a 12-year-old and an 18-year-old, how to read. How about we take one last question, because we want to get to small groups where you can share this, because then we're going to be doing another big sharing out afterwards of your questions.
You
Okay?
know what, we haven't had a, how about if we go here since she hasn't had a chance?
Okay.
Just to carry on what you're saying, Karina, my son, who's now 20, had an IEP, was on the spectrum, was in special education. And back in the day, when we didn't have all of the needs, and I don't mean special education needs, I mean social, emotional needs of children, it was a perfect fit. The inclusion model was amazing. And I am a strong, I support the inclusion model till the end of the day, because that's how my child was able to be included and actually really phase out and didn't even have an IEP later in his life. But I think that has to be considered. And one of my questions was, when we get the real right now data on these class sizes, or the class sizes, how many of the students in there have IEPs today? And if we go back to this question about maintaining and enhancing educational opportunities for students, I think we're struggling maintaining it now after a pandemic. I'm sorry. So I'm not a teacher, and God bless you, and Erin's spot on over there. I think that these teachers coming off of a pandemic, and just from where I sit as a parent, they're working to the bone trying to maintain and enhance educational opportunities. And I can't wait to see what these class sizes look like. Whoever said it over there, they're right. It's probably the most important piece of paper missing from this packet. What are these class sizes going to look like?
We're going to move to the next spot right now, and time to take a break. There's lots of munchies and everything over there. When you return, I'm going to have put a packet. If you turn your packet over, you're going to see there's a colored X on the packet.
Not a sticker, as the slide says. They didn't put them on there, so we put an X on.
So I'm going to put those on each of these 6 tables. We would ask you then, and I know we all hate to do this, but we're going to ask that you move to the table where your colored X is to engage in a conversation with some different stakeholders so we can get the most robust feedback that we can. So please take a break. We'll do about 10-minute break. How about we're back at 10 o'clock, please? at this point, could I invite you to please refill your coffee and/or any munchies and move to the table with the colored X that matches your packet? Thank you very much. We've got about 2-3 minutes. So if you wouldn't mind moving to those tables. Okay, red's here, green is here. Brown is here. Okay. Blue is here and black is here. Now wait a minute, somebody made a brown. Wait, this is supposed to be a black? Somebody, there was a brown over there, we should have a black. Okay. Yes, how about this table being black, the black table? Instead of, well, where's the black markers? Well, there's 2 sets of brown. It's the X on the paper, not necessarily the color of the markers. Sorry.
So do we have a black table?
Well, we're working on a black table. Would you mind being at the brown table there? And we'll make this the black table. We're going to make this the black. This is a black table. Brown is right there. Sorry for the confusion. For our first tasks, would you please introduce yourselves at the small group tables? Thank you.
So welcome back to new groups. Please remember there's tons of coffee over there and food, and lunch is arriving soon. So there's a lot of food that you are able to consume, and please get up and move if you need to. So we're going to divide, you've already divided really into your smaller groups. We're going to keep in mind those ground rules for dialogue and discussion. And then you're going to actually write on those poster papers. There's going to be each one, Suzanne numbered them 1 to 5 for each one of the recommendations. So you will write your comments on for each one, right? Recommendation 1 at the top, whatever it is. And then we're going to do a gallery walk afterwards. We don't have enough wall space, so we're actually going to use the tables to put them out. And then Suzanne and I will go through afterwards, do a quick analysis while you're all eating lunch. But make sure that there is somebody in your group that is going to be the recorder and somebody who is going to be the spokesperson, too, so that when we have that opportunity to share out what it is that you've written on there. Okay? So you have the laptops at your table. Use those laptops. Every table can actually have 2 if you need to take a peek at that data. You've raised a lot of amazing questions about data. Be sure to write it down on those sheets. I wrote some of mine. Just please ignore my handwriting that are up there. That's up there. But for the rest of you too, be sure to write that down. And you're going to do it by recommendation. So you can refer to those last 2 pages in your PowerPoint. So you have those recommendations in front of you. And you're going to use the data, your perceptions, and what you want to offer today, too, to put in under comments on those, for each of those. So here's what we want you to think about. And you've already started this conversation. What do we need to stop, or continue doing? You want more data. So make sure to write that down and write down the different kinds of data. I tried to write down as many of the things that you wrote. We've got lots of things that are up in the parking lot already, so we'll do that. How does it fit into our priorities as a community in Oswego and in the school district? What's relatively easy to do? What do you see as the low-hanging fruit? And part of that can be, get us the updated data. That can be one thing that can happen, too. So, but there are some other things that you might look at and say, could you look at this? Could you look at that? What has to happen, perhaps in what order, because we're going to ask you to tell us a few of the next steps that you think should be happening. At the very end, we'll do a very quick activity. We're going to write down a few things that you believe are the next steps. And what things are missing in terms of skill sets, data, or some of the resources that we have. So those are some of the questions, and I'll actually keep this up, and I'll just keep clicking back and forth, because you've got these in your packet, too. These are some other kinds of questions that we want you to think about. What other information do you need? And we're going to let you get to work. So, no. What I was saying also to the things that you're bringing to the table as a community member and the other things, but do it by recommendation, but add in also the things that you want to know. So you're looking at data, and you're...
Yes, and they're numbered. The sheets are numbered.
And the sheets are numbered. So you should be doing... We're going to decide that right now. How long? What do you think? Well, let's start with 30 minutes for 5. I imagine you're going to want a little more, but in about 20 minutes, lunch is coming anyway. So let's do this for 30 minutes, see how it's working, because we've got more time afterwards that we're going to be able to go over everybody's recommendation sheets.
And because this is a group forum, if you're at a table and you notice someone has not had an opportunity to share, would you facilitate that? So we really want to make sure we're getting equal voice and everybody has a shot at talking and adding their feedback. So please be that facilitator role in your group if necessary. Thank you.
We're going to wander around and listen too, so that if there are things that I need to run back and write down that I'm hearing you say, to make sure that they get put into the notes, okay?
Oh, and one more, sorry. I put up a new parking lot. We're keeping the other, but that was from the initial session. I just want to disaggregate these. So if you have other parking lot stickums, please put that up on the new one. Thank you.
So, yes, yes, this recommendation is done every year. It's more, I guess, the other thing is, in terms of you said it wouldn't. Based on what? Very hard to talk to. Great sale. Oops, we're not on doing that. Here we go.
is not a family play. Professional, like younger couple. One down by the pool. One with the town. That's what. But I guess my issue is that research future. More data after, more data micron.
Actual document.
Are you getting down something for every one of the recommendations? We can continue the time if we need to, but.
So special ed, special education, and then special education, other states, documented potential. What else are we missing? That's implied, right? So so this is just collecting data. So before, after, what, every piece has a what's the trending? Where's the money? So, so we just got, all right, we're collecting this. What do we do? What's one? So now they're talking, I'm working with like 15 years ago. Sorry, I'm not. Oh, we just brainstormed out all the other things. So great. So why late? Why late? Right. Right. So what if, all right, so, but that point, what if they, so we don't know for what?
Right on the back, do you think?
So it's kind of like, what? They actually said no, we get you. Oh. I know, I understand. And every time the community shoots it down. So generally, no. But also open down. We spend
They're just further
Yeah. So, and then right after that, what? Oh, yeah, you actually.
right.
And the number, yes. Very good. Yes. The number of more transitions kindergarten and graduation.
Well, they're not.
That's different. Oh, yeah, transitions are terrible. There's good and bad. I have a couple of friends right now that are specifically COVID-wise, we weren't supposed to. Yeah, we're done with that. You gotta move out of it. Here's one. Pretty good. Two. We did kill two. You know, 600 people.
Sorry, we are all facilities committee role in development, monitor long-term facilities plan for the district. Why are we not? Question mark, why are we not? The only thing that I thought this has come from that's the holistic sort of issue. We're talking about facilities without looking at what is the future plan? How many more rooms? How many reading teachers? Do we have enough space for this number of special reading sections? Real analysis.
Rising taxes. How will cities and nothing. Holistically nested. Charts every 5 years. Kelly will tell you, start every 5 years.
We're going to grab the last of your sheets. We've got them set out by color. They should grab a marker and their Post-it.
Okay, may I have your attention, please, while you're finishing up at your tables? The gallery walk gives you an opportunity to add. So if you feel as though you didn't have enough time or you've thought of something else. So what we'll be asking is a member of the group to bring a colored pen from your table. And we've separated out your recommendations on the tables there. A couple, we've had to go over to a couple tables. So look for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll be having you rotate to each of the colors that are not yours and read their responses. If it sort of sparks an idea, then please write it down in your color marker. If you have any other suggestions, if space is a little tight, please bring a marker, but also bring the Post-it notes. We may want to put them on the Post-it note if there's no room on the actual chart paper. We're going to take about 15 minutes or so for this. We'll probably take 1 or 2 minutes. We'll just watch to see if you're ready to move to the next table. And how about if you all just pick a color that is not yours for this first blush? You're going to read through each of the 5 recommendations or comments on the recommendations. Then when we see that you've read through those, you've had a chance for your team color to mark on anything you want to make sure you add to that or that made you think of, and then, or with a Post-it note, and then we will look and see if folks are done with table number 1, and we'll say, okay, please move to the next table.
For example, the purple group can go perhaps to the brown table. Take your purple markers with you. The purple group, I would say start right over here. You can add to what somebody else did, but I want you to have a chance to look at the comments that another group made. What color are we here? Blue? You are blue. How about if the blue group comes over here to the green? And you'll have about 5 minutes to go through what they have.
Okay, brown, there's a purple way in the back if you want to start there.
Bring your marker, bring a Post-it. Thank you for putting things up on the parking lot. We're going to type them all up today. So go with your color group to a different color. We have red over here, so if you're not red, who would like to come to this table?
These folks
you were
are going
red. You can pick one of the others.
You're going to purple. and
Green
then just
group,
shift
if you'd like to
another
come over
color.
here and start with the red, perfect. Red, I think you've got that one right back there. Thanks. Red, yep. Yep, then you're going to move to the other ones too. Okay?
Yes. Question paper, blue, though we move to this table. We love it, and put a little asterisk, but if there's something that you think is missing, there's 4 here, and then your question 5 is over there.
We'll give you about 5 minutes, and then we'll be able to rotate. So you'll each be able to see everybody else's work. If you think something is missing, add to it. If you're all set, we're going to change you to a different group. Lots of hearts. There. They're number 5. Ready to move? All right, we're going to have everybody move to the next group. We're going to have you move that way. Everybody's going to move around this way, okay? Even if you get to your own, add to your own. So this group is moving here. This group is moving here. If there was anything you didn't finish that you want to add when you get to yours, you're going right to that group. If you were here, you're going over here. Yes, whoever was there goes here now. That's okay, you can add to it if you want to. Just giving, some people are landing that way.
I love that building. My kids go there. We're going to move you here. You're going to move here. Okay. To finish 4 and 5, this is your time to add. I don't care which paper you add it to, but a lot of you didn't get to it, so it's a good time to like take the couple minutes and add to it. Remember to check. I see a heart next to things people love and agree with. Question marks if you have them, that's fine.
Okay, looks like we can probably move. Green group can move up here. Just keep moving to the next one. Remember, look at 4 and 5. We didn't get a lot of initial feedback on 4 and 5, so add your color comments now. This way so that Brown can move in. Make sure that question is on. That's an important question. Agree with or have a question about, jot that down. Give a couple minutes and then we'll be able to do a quick debrief. This crew's moving here. That's okay. To move, okay. Okay, green group, we need you to move to the next one so red can come up here. I think red is coming here. Yep, couple more minutes. About 1 more minute, we're going to wrap up what we're thinking and writing. Suzanne, will you write down some of these words as we say them? So before we break for lunch, what I really want from you is an initial reaction. You've had the chance to discuss it in large group, discuss it in small group, to go through and see what your colleagues in this room are thinking about. What are some of the key phrases or words that came up, Val?
We're all pretty much on the same page. We're thinking about the same thing.
So we're on the same page. We've got the same thought process going forward. What else are you thinking? Anything that struck you as you went through?
I'm seeing transparency issue because several of these questions go back to are we being transparent in this process?
Okay. Transparency. Restate what he, yes, transparency, yes. It's evident, especially among this group. You are putting out the things that you are thinking about, the things that you are concerned about.
One thing that I noticed as I was walking around on many of the posters was a desire for the school board to go in and see the classrooms that they're proposing being used while school's in session and students and staff are actually using them so that they can see how they're being used, what they're being used for, what it actually looks like currently in a given day. And then also come visit Leighton so that they can see what is also happening there that would then have to happen in additional spaces.
And that's written on one of these?
It's written on most of them.
Perfect.
So this group, they made a good point, and I don't believe we saw them on any of the other tables, but why did we add 9 administration positions if we were so far in debt? If our enrollment's decreasing, why do we need to add more overhead? When we have nine administrative positions, we could, for one of those, we could have 2 or 3 teachers, TAs, more in-class support. Why, if we're condensing, why are we growing up top? It's just, it doesn't make sense, so maybe there's an answer, and they can share that with us.
Thank you.
Something that wasn't really addressed, but I just want to say it because I think it needs to be said. They talk about the full value tax rate going down and the district being in very good fiscal, a very good fiscal footing and all of that. But they looked at the tax rate, the full value tax rate, and the tax levy, but not looked at the overall budgets. Overall budget has been increasing, whereas tax levy goes down, but could be affected by other things. Tax levy is just the local share of what we pay for taxes. It doesn't affect, it's state aid and other payment agreements and things aren't included in that. And that needs to be analyzed and included in this data as well, because in the future, we are going to pay more local share, and that's in the data and not really being addressed. So. Probably, I might have put it somewhere.
Okay, make sure. Okay, perfect.
I think one of the things that I scribbled this down, a lot of things, I kept writing the word vision and all of these things near where I saw people kind of echoing the same thing, is that I get the sense that a lot of people in this room feel like, where are we going? We're making decisions. It's like someone said, well, here, we found a puzzle piece. We'd like you to put this in the puzzle, but we're not showing you the picture on the box. We want you to figure out where that puzzle piece goes. Or, like, here's the car, head down the road. We're not telling you where the road goes. And it starts with good data. It starts with a projection of where they think we are. And you want to pull something out of design theory. Here's where we are. Here's where we want to be. What do we need to do to get to where we want to be? And we don't know where we're going. And so, yeah, let's close Leighton. Here's a couple spitball ideas, what we might do with it. Wait, shouldn't we have that beforehand? So I see that in a lot of writing around here, and I almost feel like maybe this event should have been held before questions about Leighton were discussed.
So I just heard you say context, which I think was mentioned before. So the why of what we're doing. And so you mentioned knowing where we are, where we want to be, the vision piece. How do we get there? Absolutely.
Just piggybacking off of that, our group talked about, like, there are probably some pros to doing this, and we're all concentrating on the cons because we don't have a why. We don't know where we're going with it, so we're saying, why are we even doing this? These are all the reasons why we shouldn't, and no one has really given us a reason why we should, so that we can like explore the options of what we're using it for. Is it really going to be financially beneficial to our district? We don't have really any concrete positive whys in the vision of where it's going.
And we know all change has to start with the why. You know, you have to understand whatever the urgency is of it, so you want to make sure, you've said this again and again this morning, what's all the data that will tell us what's happening, but you wanted to know the why first of how it even got started too.
In 25 years, the district has tried to close an elementary school at least 5 times based on the enrollment question. And each time, the district has shot it down. The voters have said no. So, obviously, reduced numbers, that's not enough. That's why that why is important.
Thank you.
Assuming that they are going to close Leighton, what's going to happen to the staff? And are they going to have to rebid for those jobs? How is that equitable for, you know, everyone else?
So make sure that question is on there. That's one of those big process questions it's a different process from redistricting. And there are pieces and steps to that, absolutely, if it comes to that.
I think I'm just asking this question for clarification. So everything that's written on all of these pages are going to be put together in a document and presented to the board for their meeting this week. Okay. Well, and how, like, yeah, I guess I'm just, like, how long, I don't want them to sit down and then here's all of the findings from the focus group today, glance over it. I mean, there are some significant questions on all of these, and they deserve to have some time to really think before having to then talk maybe publicly about that in front of, you know, at an actual board meeting. Okay.
The process at this point, I will be attending the board meeting to give a general overview of what you were interested in stating today. These data that you're generating will be put together for the board to use as they continue deliberations. I would encourage all of you to watch those board meetings. You know, when I mentioned what's the board already done, they've come, and I don't have all of it obviously, but I think some of the questions you have, they've had, and they are discussing those. So case in point would be to continue to follow the board meetings, because then you'll get a sense of how they're reacting to your reactions.
Will you be at this next one on the 3rd?
Yes, I will.
Sharing this information so this week?
Yes. Yes.
We'll have all of this compiled by the end of the weekend and to them. So we'll make sure to do that. And then Suzanne is going to that board meeting. We'll be giving it to your superintendent, recommending that at least this committee is getting it initially so that you can go back through and look at all these comments that have been written on there too. And then I assume that your superintendent and board will make a decision when they release it. They're trying to be transparent and to get everything out, so I do hope that that will be happening shortly.
But it will happen with the board, so if you're watching that, you'll get a sense of what's the board's initial reaction to your concerns and questions. I think you can attend as a community member, but I'm not sure the process in Oswego. Most of when that happens, you can attend but not speak, unless you have to sign up to speak. Right, and that's pretty typical of most school districts because the board needs to get on with the board's agenda.
I just wanted to mention how we're going to meet the students' needs if the class sizes are larger, and we're concerned about how we're losing enrollment and we're losing it to, you know, these private schools or home schools. So if the students' needs aren't being met, Won't more parents go to homeschool instead or to a different school where their needs will be met better than what our district can do because the class sizes are too large? And we already have issues with reading. At least I've been told that there's an issue with reading standards throughout the whole district. And that it's not just my child, but it's every child. So how is this going to be helpful?
Okay. I want to make sure that what you're stating is also written there. I'm going to take pictures. We're going to compile this all up, type this all up, but let's make sure everything is there. I saw somebody else's. Did you have your hand up before?
So just to piggyback off of the vision thing, vision is important in any aspect that you do, and one of that is being transparent. And I think all of us kind of feel maybe we're not getting as many answers and transparency from the superintendent and the school board when we ask questions. We're not getting the why. We're not getting the how does this look later on. We're just getting the, well, this is what we want to do. Okay, but why? That vision and that why and how we're going to get there, that's super important.
And including all of those elements that talk about the literacy levels and special education levels.
All of it. It can't just be about, you know, this is fiscally responsible, but how does this affect our teachers? How does this affect our employees? How does this affect the community, the schools, in all entirety, not just fiscal responsibility?
I'm also wondering, like some of us might be, that how receptive would be Board of Education people would be to this, and how would they perceive this? Would they simply see this as a formality that has been fulfilled, or would they be taking actions based on these recommendations, or they will simply see this as an emotional response from us? Because after all, this is a focus group. So these are just, you're getting some opinions, you know. But what are the facts here? What are some pointed questions, and how would they factor in?
What are they going to do with all the information that just came out from your hard work this morning?
Because they can simply say, all this is answered in our data.
Right. So I'm encouraging you all to go to that board meeting.
I think the other part is taking a step back that we also need to do is the fact that they're starting this, and at least they're involving us in October. And not waiting until April when that budget comes out and all of a sudden, hey, by the way, we're closing it. I'm happy to the fact that this group that stands in front of us has had an opportunity to see what has been presented. We are now giving them an opportunity to answer the questions that came from this, and they can answer it before we have to vote on a budget. So I'm very thankful that both our Board of Ed and the administrators that we have that have worked very hard at putting this together, as well as the two young ladies that are here with us today, that they're giving us this opportunity as the select group of parents to review this. Now it's on them to go back and start looking at everything that we put forth and know that this is going to be a continued question that we need answers to.
And I'll take the young lady. I haven't been called that in forever. Wow. Thank you, thank you.
Made. All the years that I've worked for this district or been a parent or I've lived here all my life, I appreciate the fact that we're being involved in this and that we have a voice in this. But I think your point is good that now it's in their hands for them to build that trust with us, to allow us to be involved really. So you're right, it's back in their hands now. We'll just see how this plays out. But your point in thanking them for that, I think, is really important. Because it is a very important point that they did reach out to us and want to hear our opinions and our voice about this.
And I hope you all stay involved, that this is something that you don't take this as a one morning thing to do, that you are the people that stay involved, that go to meetings, that bring somebody else, bring your neighbor, bring your friends with you. So how about lunch? You've worked really, really hard. Lunch is over there. Let's take 30 minutes for lunch. Suzanne and I are going to try to go through some of these, and so we can walk through what some of those recommendations were that you made, and we'll see how you want to wrap things up at the end of this, okay? So have a wonderful lunch. Take a break.
we're going to go ahead and start with a little bit of debriefing. A couple questions that have come up that I think might be good for everyone. We were asked what Maureen and my role is with Costello and Silke, and though we all work as consultants, so we were not involved in doing the research or writing the report. The first time we saw it was after the Board of Ed saw it. So we want to make sure that you understand that we're here. Actually, when Alan and Deb Ayers were asked if they would facilitate this meeting, they said no, it's not appropriate for them to do that since they did the research. So that keeps it on a little more of a transparent and ethical level, which is kind of what we do. Anybody? Okay. Maureen, when you have a minute, one of the pieces that we noticed is that we have great representation. A couple of our notes are going to be that we're hoping we can find safe ways for participation for individuals who typically would not be comfortable in this type of a focus group, and make sure we're getting some input from a broad range of individuals that may or may not be represented here today. We have been doing quick with trying to pull together just some general pieces. What's going to happen is we're going to take the charts, we will compile those. We're going to be then taking that information. The board will get that information. We'll ask them how they would like to distribute that information. As we know with all decision making, there are 4 different levels of decisions, and we are in a collaboration mode. This is not consensus. We're not making the decisions today. We are passing on our recommendations and suggestions for the board and the administration to consider and get you some answers.
Thank you. Thanks. So what we did, and like Suzanne said, we'll be typing all this up and getting the full thing out and then writing a summary from there. But we tried to go through and take keywords. So specific really to all of the recommendations are the vision, transparency, updated data and verifying it, continued community engagement, particularly of this focus group, facilities usage, looking at different populations that might have been missed or weren't even included in the initial data in terms of socioeconomic, special education, ENL. The homeschool population came up a number of times, not even addressed in the data. Grant programs and funding came up. The involvement, again, of all stakeholders, and Suzanne just said that, especially those who don't participate. I know somebody mentioned to me, I think you were mentioning to me, that there are families and parents that we probably should have gone to pick up. I know I used to do that as a principal to make sure that I got all of my parents to the different events and all of my different kids. So that districts need to be looking at that also. Board of Education should be visiting all of the schools, seeing what's happening. That was listed on a number of documents. And then how does this initiative situation fit with the revitalization of the city of Oswego? So those are kind of the general pieces that came out. Under the recommendation 1 that talked about the updated enrollment, again, we need accurate data. We're talking about multiple administrators and the efficiency of those administrators. Vision again, attracting new families, the economic impact of those. I mean, you listed many, many other things, but we tried to pull out some of the other things that might not have kept coming up in our discussions. Staff retention, and again, the involvement of the Board of Education in terms of understanding what enrollment projections are. Under 2, lots and lots of information. That was the consider closing Leighton Elementary School. So vision, class size, why is only Leighton considered? And also the equity of the 5 elementary schools in this district. Why is closing a school the only option? And then if it does become an option, what's the process for redistributing the staff and the students? What's the impact of state aid? Again and again, the impact of COVID and the pandemic and the trauma that came with it. Not only the illnesses, but the trauma that came with that. Again, verify this current data. Consider all the students, we listed them before. Quality of instruction came up under there, so that if you're maintaining the 5 schools or you're downsizing to 2, what's the quality of instruction that's going to be happening there? The effect of policies and possible changes, and graduation rates are part of that too, because we know that the elementary leads up. I used to tell my teachers, you are all teaching a graduating senior. You are all, even if you have a kindergarten here, you have to think about all those students as becoming future graduates, and we have to look at that at elementary level. The third recommendation was that Facilities Planning Committee. And some of the comments that come up were about savings versus the quality of education. Class size came up again and again, even here in terms of facilities. And the support and special area staff that you would have. Looking at community and economic growth. And what will you use Leighton for if it's closed? Other districts sell their buildings, they reuse their buildings in different ways, they use them when they're doing capital projects, so one building moves into a closed building. What are they considering using it for? Because those are all the pieces down the road. It's a plan that they're looking for. Giving voice to parents of underrepresented children as well as all of the children. How to address safety. We didn't really talk about that, but that came up on quite a few of the documents back there. When you have more students in fewer schools, what's the safety there? And then bus safety came up too, and the bus routes. And then looking at needs-based for social emotional learning, and then ENL and special education. What are the resources, the personnel, and support for students? Continue to involve stakeholders. That was throughout all of these. This group wants to stay together, probably add some more people to it, so you're making sure you're getting all voices, but you want to be part of that. You also want to have some blueprints and maps of these buildings. You want to figure out what's really there. And when they do the facilities usage, they pull those out, they look at them, and they go through school by school. I heard several of you saying, well, my classroom or my space used to be a closet or whatever. As a special ed teacher, I get that. That's how I started. And but they go through and they'll look at all those blueprints. You want that done. You want to know what real space is going to be used, because remember that there are state regulations in terms of physical class size for classrooms also. The fourth recommendation was about engaging the community and the architect in the planning and discussions of facilities needs and the options as early as possible. Homeschool came up again, but homeschool in a different way in terms of family proximity. So knowing that children that live within the Leighton neighborhood, the Kingsford neighborhood, that kind of thing, that type of homeschool definition there. And families and students staying together, because often when they move classrooms, that's one of the issues that families always have. Oh my goodness, I don't have enough room for my third grader here, but my fifth grader has to go there. So that's another big issue that came up a few times. Under the fifth recommendation, it was really looking at thoughtfully considering the fiscal implications, but looking at where funds can be recovered other than closing a school. We have 9 administrators. Why are we in debt? What's the effect on state funding and state aid? What are the future tax projections? What's the vision? And then if there's a budget vote when this happens and it doesn't pass, what happens with the contingency budget? So those are some very real questions that come up that the board and superintendent will have to consider. So obviously there are many, many more things I'm going to add to the list, but we went through, circled, and tried to capture the main pieces. Were there things that I missed in my very quick speaking? Sorry, I went through really fast.
I guess the only thing is, you mentioned it once, is you talked about integrating with the city's plan for revitalization. A lot of this, I would draw that big circle around all 5, is that if we do this as a stovepipe, if these decisions are made in a stovepipe manner as the school district, as if it's on an island, and you're not considering the holistic nature of its relationship with the city and the county around it, you're going to make mistakes and things are not going to be synchronized. So the decisions that the school district is making have to be synchronized with the other stakeholders that are making other decisions, because they're going to affect each other. And to proceed without that, without some of the regular touchstones, is quite foolhardy, actually.
Okay. I will try to capture all that in here. Thank you.
Anything else? And again, we're also going to be collating the parking lot comments, and so if you think of anything right now, please make sure you put it on a Post-it, and we will include that as well.
Anything else that you thought was missing or that we need to make sure that we emphasize in our notes?
The whole intent of this group is to help the Board of Education to make the right decision. They should not see this as any attack or any hidden agenda, because we are also trying to go with the facts. And facts have to be complete in their own sense, not part of it. So As I said, yes, there is a system we are trying to fix or address those things, but when there is a system, there might be system errors that we are trying to fix, but we also be cautious about human errors, our own blind spots, our own prejudices, biases, because this concerns the future of our younger generation, the quality of education, and this community. Thank you.
I'm glad that was live streamed. That's not a comment that I could have captured, and you said it very, very well. Thank you. Other things? So these are questions to help us work with you, work with other groups. So what worked today that assisted you, in really understanding the situation and the recommendations? These are the questions that I ask my college students too, like at the end of a lesson. All right, what worked today? What didn't work, so I can change it, because I don't want to keep teaching something that isn't working the right way. So having the initial conversation and then doing that whole gallery walk piece. Okay, great. Anything else that really worked for you? Was it what you expected? Did you know what to expect? No? Okay, all right. So hopefully it worked for you. You taught us a lot about data, the data pieces that were missing, so that we will go back to our consulting group and let them know too, that there are major pieces that need to be addressed every time the data is collected on a district, especially when they're discussing a school closing or the impact of finances and everything else on a school. So thank you so much for that. How did this make you feel today? Yeah? Roller coaster of feelings, anything else? That's fine. It's what our kids feel every day when we're teaching, right? Unsure? Okay. What do you want to happen that you're unsure about? What do you want to happen next?
I'd like to know what the answers are to the questions.
Okay. So you want that updated data, you want to know what the vision is, you want to know how this is going to fit into the revitalization of this entire community, city, and county. Huge.
I think just the long-term impact. If the building is closed, what really does it look like for everybody involved?
Long-term impact, okay?
And also in future, if any such thing happens, let us be involved earlier rather than later in the process. That way, we get to know what needs to be addressed, what are we missing. We all have blind spots. Right? So how do we help each other? This is a teamwork. We are only as strong as the weakest link.
So it's really commenting on process, too. So really understanding that to make big decisions within a school district, you always have to be transparent. You always have to be bringing in community members, making sure you're getting representatives of all of the groups. Start it early.
Provided you want to keep it democratic.
Right.
That's what democracy is all about.
Right.
It's not easy, though.
No. No, it's not.
As a current teacher and parent of Leighton students, it was just really nice to see all of the engagement from all of the stakeholders. I mean, I think many of us are here because of the talk of school closure, and it was just really nice to see so many people from so many different situations, business stakeholders, really taking the time on a Saturday to invest their Saturday to, give this really mindful, thoughtful conversation, dialogue, and feedback. To know that, obviously I have a personal vested interest. I love Leighton. I love my students. I love our team and the staff there. I love our families. And it's just nice to see that other people are looking at what would be lost if Leighton was closed.
Perfect. What else?
I think back to the first question, the diversity of the stakeholders was very nice to hear so many different opinions from so many different backgrounds.
Right. Your voice is quiet, so I'm going to repeat it for the live stream, okay? So appreciating the diversity of the stakeholders that are here, the people that are represented. So I'm glad that they were able to gather this many people to come. You're right, on a Saturday and you worked really hard. We really didn't give you a lot of breaks, and you worked really hard. So, you know, your work is greatly appreciated, absolutely. So what feels most challenging and worries you?
Inconsistency.
The inconsistency of?
So, had all of us known that this study was going to be conducted, maybe we could have had our input in what type of data should have been gathered in the first place. So the obvious data, which is what was already collected, but then all the additional questions. Then this group would have been answered, like we would have had more answers. So I feel like it's very inconsistent because this happens a lot, where as a parent, it feels like you're sort of in the background and you don't know what's going on all the time.
I guess when you say what worries me is that one of the things that keeps coming up is that this group and what you gathered from earlier data is the community does not see closing a school right now as a priority. And so how did this come up? Did they check? And I understand that you're looking at fiscal requirements and things like that, that was a possibility. But before they throw this out there and start spitballing about what they might do with the building, it might make a little more sense to sort of gather some of the stories that I heard here today about other concerns that might be more pressing than closing down an elementary school to save some space.
Thank you, and I encourage you all to participate in those board meetings, and when there is a survey, to complete that, to tell your stories, because we know that it's stories that are heard, because stories are the things that connect all of us. So when you did that today, you all told different stories, and it made a difference. You wanted to say something else, sir?
So I might be most frequently speaking because there are so many thoughts swelling in my mind and how decisions are made. That kind of makes me think increasingly. Because the point is, we all have perceptions, you know, and we gathered here to gather opinions. Opinions are a part of your perception. But I always say perceptions are critical and important, but in that perception, where are the facts? What is happening to the fact, right? Because if I give in this professional space, right, if I give my perception that Earth is flat, how should that perception be taken, right? Earth is flat, that's my perception. So what's happening to facts? So in this group today, a focus group that we came together to discuss the study and the findings and the recommendations, because recommendations have already been made. That means pretty much it is about to be released, you know. And we are brought at a point where we don't know what's going to happen next. And apparently I haven't been to Board of Education meeting. Apparently you can't ask them questions. Then what is the point? So the bottom line is, how do we help the system make best decisions? And if we are only seen as emotional parents, then there ends the matter, you know?
So it's understanding what the process is and how you can change it because you have a voice and you want to be able to use it as community members, taxpayers, parents, grandparents, business people in this community. Anything else that you want to ask us about this? Oh.
I want to read a quote at this point, if you permit a quote. So this, yeah, so basically when critical or important decisions are being made, right? So I come across this quote that says, you might have heard it, the quote is, God grant me the strength to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So where should be the emphasis? Think about it, right? And this is by Reynold Niebuhr, the person who's credited with this quote. So if we are trying to make a difference, do we know the difference? I mean, do we have the wisdom whether we oppose it or support it, right? With emotions, we can. That doesn't help in the long run. So our decisions should be both for short term as well as long term, but it's easier said than done. What is actually needed is also situational awareness. Thank you.
I just wanted to add that I think the possible disruption of the children's lives that attend that school in larger classroom sizes in all of our elementary schools that's huge. That really needs to be part of the data that we're looking at.
So some of that is also in the research about class size and the effect of change on children, too. So some of those are those pieces. Right, right. Something else to add to that. Walk backwards and fall. There you go. Okay. Hold on. Now let me do this with my left hand. Okay, so next steps. We're going to hand everybody index card, and we want you to write down what you believe just write down a couple things that you believe the next steps should be. Based on everything we have, we're going to put everything together. Yep. You don't have to put your name on it, just jot down a couple of the next steps, another one of the pieces that we'll put together for information to give to the board and the superintendent.
As you're writing those final comments, and we are the only things between you and getting out in this gorgeous day, we do want to thank you. The amount of time and attention you paid today to critical issues for the district, for your children and grandchildren, and for this community is just wonderful. So thank you from us for your willingness to be honest and forthright and open about what you see are the next steps and what we need to be considering as we send this data to the board and the superintendent. I do want to thank them for making this day happen and this day possible. I think they were very committed to making sure that even though we might want to tweak this a little bit, that there was an opportunity for individuals with a wide range of positions in the district and stakeholder involvement, that you had time to share what you were thinking, and then we will have an opportunity to give them that feedback. So thank you very much, and enjoy the day.